But at the other end of the scale from a name change was the release date. It had to be ready for release the last weekend in May. That was the deal breaker. The problem was that everyone involved agreed that the one to really fill Marty's shoes was Michael J. Fox, who had emerged as the focal point character in the show Family Ties because Meredith Baxter Birney was pregnant. There was no way they could film the entire movie in the tiny window between the end of Family Ties shooting and the release date. So grudgingly, they had to go looking for someone else. Spielberg suggested C. Thomas Howell, who had worked with him on E.T., but the studio wanted Eric Stoltz instead. They were just wrapping up a film called Mask that they knew was going to be big and felt this would be a chance to cash in on Stoltz's inevitable popularity. So certain was Sheinberg that he told Zemeckis that if it didn't work out, he could replace him. For Tom Wilson, this was his first real film, and he was very excited about it naturally, but had a bit of a conflict with their star. Stoltz was very into the role, and that role included being very physical with Biff, which he did despite Wilson asking repeatedly to dial it down. Instead, he dialed it up until Wilson went home bruised. After that, there was restrained animosity between the two, and Wilson was looking forward to paying Stoltz back in the scene where Biff pulls Marty out of the car and punches him. He would never get the chance. Zemeckis shot for 4 weeks, then visited Spielberg with 45 minutes of edited footage to get a second opinion, and both were in agreement. Eric Stoltz was a fine actor, but he just wasn't Marty McFly. Stoltz was very method, like Weller in last week's RoboCop, and like him wanted to be called by his character name on set, not his own. This technique no doubt contributed to his success playing the young man with the deformed skull and mask. Now on this film and going, "What is so funny that I fall down while pulling on my pants?" And, "This is so sad, Marty returns to a family he's never known." He was a completely wrong fit to the part, and even said so after a while. He was a serious actor, not a comedy one. And however good you are as an actor, there's an old saying, death is easy, comedy is hard. Lloyd understood that, and was stealing every scene from Stoltz that they were in together. This was a rough situation for everyone, and Zemeckis was looking at not only years of work for himself and Gale going up in smoke, but that if this film flopped, which seemed likely based on what they'd shot, Romancing the Stone would be written off as the anomalous success in a disappointing career, and he'd never direct again. He may not even write again. But Spielberg was committed to the project and to Zemeckis, so he did 2 things. One of them was to go with Zemeckis to see Sheinberg and explain the situation. Explain how they were going to get out of this situation then, and how much more it was going to cost to do it. And Sheinberg, to his credit, approached this very rationally, saying something to the effect that if new wunderkind Zemeckis and film deity Spielberg both come into his office and tell him that the film is broken, it would be idiotic to argue that it isn't. He'd back them up and come up with the money. So the Eric Stoltz Marty McFly, in the words of Doc Brown himself, was erased from existence. The new plan involved starting the whole thing over with Michael J. Fox like they'd originally wanted. Crispin Glover was a divisive and complicated figure on set. Unlike Stoltz, he was a perfect fit for George. It was just that Glover had a tendency to be odd. He clashed repeatedly with the producers and Zemeckis on set over various things, and one of the weirdest being a refusal to perform one scene in the camera frame so that Zemeckis had to have the grips build a wall to keep him from doing it again and again and again. He also wouldn't accept the wardrobe decision for the film's conclusion, wandering around in his preferred outfit until Neil Canton yelled at him to do what he was told and change already. To the crew, he was a pain in the ass. To the cast, though, he was a creative force and artist whose performance elevated the whole production. Despite the frustrations on set, everyone agreed that Glover's performance was great, and it had nothing to do with George being recast in the sequels. It was because Glover wanted to be paid the same as Michael J. Fox, plus get script approval and director approval. Yes, he wanted the power to remove Robert Zemeckis from his own movie. Bob Gale told Glover's agent it was so far out of line. Glover would be going from $60,000 on the first film to $1 million for the second, not to mention the perks that an A-list box office crushing actor might get. He refused to even give a counter-offer, just a deadline. 2 weeks, or we write it without you. But despite even that, the crew still praises the end result of Glover on screen, and it does indeed capture everything it needs to show how this person can be beaten down into the joke of a man seen at the beginning of the film, and yet grow in a different way to become someone who has made something of his life.